Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome back to another episode of Old versus New. Up to date we have the Hornby Stephenson's rocket. Right, are you ready to see today's contestants then? Because here they come. First up then we have the 57-year-old Hornby Stevenson's rocket. There it is, yes, good old vintage model, that one. And of course on the complete opposite end of the spectrum we have the 2020 Hornby Railways Stephenson's rocket train pack, which looks absolutely amazing. Now today you might be expecting me to walk all over the Triang loco, right? Telling you how terrible it is, how old-fashioned it is, how badly it runs, all of that good stuff. And you'd be absolutely right, I am going to be doing that, but don't forget, for the time that this model was released, it was pretty amazing. This loco was released in 1963, that is 57 years ago. It's the same year that the Beatles released I Wanna Hold Your Hand. It's only 2 years after the very first man in space, and it's 9 years before the first ever video game console. At the time this model was released, it represented the ultimate modern standards in model train manufacture. It's fairly safe to say that no computers were involved in its design, and when you consider that other Triang locos looks like this at the time, I do think it is quite impressive. However, this version, the 2020 version, represents almost 60 years of considerable development and improvement, and so yes, they are quite a lot different, and the modern version is quite a lot better. But let's take a close look, let's have a look at some of their features and find out how they are different. So there you have it then, the two rockets, 1963 and 2020, literally head to head with each other, which is already quite exciting, isn't it? How cool does that look? So before we get started on the comparison, a little disclaimer to make. Obviously this Triang version is not brand new, right? This has had potentially 5 or 6 decades of play, whereas this new Hornby version obviously is pretty much brand new. It's a matter of months old and I've been very, very careful with it. So obviously this isn't a truly fair comparison. To anybody that owns and loves the Triang version, please don't be offended. I'm not really trying to insult this model today. And I too own and love this model very much, despite its sort of play-worn condition. The other difference you have to take into account is the intent behind these models. I mean, this 2020 model is very much not intended as a toy. This is a super detailed model, very expensive, supposed to very accurately represent the real-life prototype. With the Triang version, while it was a very detailed model at the time, I don't believe the intent really was to create a super accurate model. I think the main purpose of these were to be toys, you know, to be enjoyed by everybody, including enthusiasts, if something like this happened to appeal to them. So there we go, those are the disclaimers out of the way. Let's then take a look at some of the differences. The first might actually be apparent just as you're looking at them here, and that is the scale. Now, as you can see, there is quite a difference in size in quite a few aspects of these models. I mean, the chimney tops, for example, are definitely at different heights. I mean, presumably this Hornby version will have been designed on a computer. All of the dimensions are going to be absolutely correct. They went and measured the real model. I don't know whether they will have done that with this version. And of course, without the aid of computers, the margin for human error is much greater. So yeah, there is quite a difference in scale, and you can see it all over the model really. And of course, the scale is a bit different because of the limitations of technology in the 1960s. How are they going to motorise something that is as tiny as this? The simple answer is I don't think they could, at least not in a way that was actually usable. I mean, the top of the boilers, as you can see here, are at noticeably different heights. The size of the fireboxes are completely different. The tenders, obviously very, very different in scale, and the coaches, look at the difference in size in the coaches there. I had absolutely no idea that the coaches were that tiny compared with the loco until I saw it. Yeah, the old version, while quite a small coach by the 1960s standards, is quite a lot larger than it should have been, so scale is a very big difference with these. Next up, the construction is pretty darn different. I mean, with the Triang version, we're talking mainly plastic where the body's concerned, except we do have this metal chimney, which is quite interesting. Was that done to make it sturdier? I'm not too sure, but the real rocket certainly doesn't have a metallic chimney like that. And then we have, in the sort of standard Triang fashion, this metal chassis underneath. Well, the 2020 Hornby rocket is completely different in that regard. We have what appears to be a plastic chimney and yet a metal body, so it's literally flipped on its head. Yeah, I believe the boiler here, at the very least, is actually made of metal, and because it's such a more nimble and finely scaled model, I guess they had to try and find ways to increase the weight any way they could. And also the firebox, look at the difference in the firebox there. It's completely different, isn't it? It almost doesn't look like it's part of the boiler, whereas obviously on the old version there, the firebox is completely at the wrong height and it's sort of just tacked onto the back of the boiler, and it's quite large as well because obviously part of the mechanism is actually inside it. Another huge difference between these two models is the decoration. Looking at the Triang, there's very few colours used. So you've got the body, which is presumably just moulded in yellow, and you can see because some of the paint's come off that the firebox has just been painted into the brown, which isn't actually that accurate. And the only other colour used on the loco actually is the black, which has lined the boiler, as you can see, and it's also on the printed, not etched, nameplate. Completely different with the latest Hornby rocket. You've got quite a few different colours used here. So you've got the cream paint on the chimney, of course. The lining isn't just black on the boiler. You've got sort of like gold lining, which is much more realistic. The firebox appears to be a separate piece. It certainly doesn't look like it's just been painted, and it very much hasn't just got a coat of brown paint on it or anything like that. Then you've got the various different parts. You've got the connecting rods here, which are sort of painted into the grey. You've got the copper colour of the pipework. Yeah, the decoration is much more careful. And I should also say that the nameplate here is not just a tampo print. It is a proper etched nameplate. Next up then, another difference which is pretty obvious is the level of detail. I mean, any pipework on the old Triang rocket, and there's not much of it, it is just sort of part of the moulding. You've got these big metal supports on the chimney, which are quite chunky. On top of the boiler, as you can see, most of the detail there is just a part of the moulding. Not so on the Hornby rocket on the 2020 version. You actually do have pipework and other details. Look at the pipework around the cylinders as well, it's ultra complex. Any additional details are separately fitted, as you can see on top of the boiler there, and you've even got the extra pipework on the chimney as well, which is a really, really finely moulded piece as well. Finally then, another major difference is the difference in finesse. I'm sure it will have been quite noticeable already, but yeah, there are huge differences there. Mainly the wheels. If I park them like this so that you can actually get a good comparison of the wheels, look how much finer the latest Hornby wheels are compared with the Triang ones. The flanges are so much smaller. The actual thickness of the wheels is very different as well. The spokes of the wheels are much finer, and as you can see, Hornbys have actually been painted up, which is great. And the same thing goes with the tender and coach wheels as well. They're much more true to life, although I should say I've changed the tender and coach wheels on the Triang version so that I can add pickups to those. Actually, they would have had plastic wheels originally, I think, which weren't a lot more realistic. Back to the locos, the underframes are incredibly different. I mean, I'll just compare a couple of shots here for you. So the Triang version, you can see the chassis, and it reaches basically all the way down to the rails. There's probably a few millimetres between the bottom of the chassis and the top of the rails. Look at the Hornby version, completely different because of the size of the motor inside this, which has to be way, way smaller than the Triang. The chassis can actually be contained entirely inside the boiler. We actually don't have anything at all poking out underneath the boiler, as is true to life. And I think that is one of the biggest differences between the two. Once you notice it, you know, the Triang looks incredibly unrealistic as a result of that, doesn't it? Almost not like the rocket at all, actually, when you start looking at that. The Hornby version, miles better in that regard. The tenders are similar too. I mean, look at all of the painted details which have been picked out on the latest Hornby version. Not so much with the Triang. I mean, it's very, very basic, although we do have some lining on the barrel, and that's true of both versions. My barrel looks rubbish because it's got this sort of crack in the middle. The barrel here actually opens to allow a DCC decoder to be fitted. I haven't done that, but no matter what I do, that barrel will not close properly. And yeah, I've tried. I've just ended up putting too much force on it, and I was scared of breaking it, so I didn't do that. A bit more comparison on the coaches then before we start talking about the mechanism. As you can see, they are incredibly different, like night and day. Besides the scale, there are so many differences as well. I mean, look at all of the separately fitted detailing on the roof of the Hornby version here, the 2020 version. Most of the all of the detail there is separately fitted using little metal wires. Not the case on the old Triang version. As you can see, it's all moulded, all moulded. The other difference is the colour. Look at this. The colour of the Triang version, the Triang coach, is actually the same as the rocket. This is something that people did criticise on my Hornby 2020 Stephenson's rocket video, the difference in colour between the coach and the engine, although that is actually accurate. If you look at the photos of the rocket replica at York, you can see that the colours are actually different. I think it's because they were manufactured in different places in real life, and therefore the colours weren't matched exactly, but that is pretty much how they were in real life. The decoration is much better as well. As you can see, all of the door handles are picked out, and they're not just picked out in the same black that the rest of the model is decorated in either. You've got interiors with this version. Look at that. You can see the seats inside the latest release. Not the case with Triang, it's just an empty interior, which presumably kept the weight down. So there you go, there are some of the differences. Hopefully that explains most of them for you. Now then, let's get these down onto the track and we'll talk a little bit about performance. And I'll do something I've never done before and remove the body of the Triang version. I don't do it with the latest Hornby version, but with the Triang, I'm willing to give it a go. Okay, so both trains are now down onto the track, and it's time now to talk a little bit about the different specs. So we'll start first of all then with the modern Hornby one, that's this one on the left. So motor, this has got a 5-pole motor, which is quite incredible given the size of the loco. It's also got all-wheel pickup on the loco and all-wheel pickup on the tender, so it has got some good reliability with the track, and in fact mine doesn't really stall particularly. The Triang version is quite a lot different. It's just got a 3-pole motor inside, which was very much the standard back in the 1960s. It does have all-wheel pickup on the loco through a sort of split chassis type thing. There's a sort of plastic spacer on the axle which prevents the two sides from shorting together, and the chassis picks up that way. There's no pickups in the tender or anything like that, although I have actually added pickups not only to the tender but also to the coach as well, which helps this to run a lot better. However, none of that was fitted as standard. Now then, as promised, I'm going to show you the disassembly of the old Triang Hornby version, although I'm not going to attempt any disassembly with the modern one until I have to, in case I do something that means I can't ever run it again, which wouldn't be a good idea. So let's try it at least with the old Triang one. So the reason I want to show the disassembly of this is because obviously it's a very unique loco, and therefore the way the body comes off is also pretty unique. So the first step is pretty unique, as is the loco. You actually have to unscrew the crank pins here, and I might have a bit too big of a screwdriver for this. Yes, I do. Hang on, take two. Okay, new screwdriver acquired. I'm going to be covering this up, but trust me, I'm taking out the crank pin. Okay, crank pin appears to be loose. I might be able to jiggle it out without covering it up. There it is. There we are. Connecting rod flops down. There we are. And now I'll do the back one. Alright, so now those are out. The next job then, and this is the crazy part, is to remove the chimney. So mine, I think you can just take it like this and it disengages from the body. So let me do that. There we are, with the supports intact, as you can see, leaving Rocket looking a bit strange and naked. And that then, and only then, should allow you to remove the loco body. To reveal the motor, circa 1963. Let's have a close look at this. So as you can see, it really does fill most of the chassis there. There's not a lot of space left over. And it is kind of just like a miniaturized version of the X03, X04 motor, except of course it's a little bit smaller and weaker. And as you can see, it works exactly the same. It's got the worm drive and the big gear between the two driving wheels, which noticeably is very, very different to the latest Hornby release, which is a much smaller and finer one. So there you go, that's the disassembly done. Now I've got the immensely fun task of putting the bugger back together again, so I'll see you in a minute after that's done. Right, we're back. Let's talk about the performance itself then. Now, on the modern Hornby version, the gearing is actually quite good. It's not amazing, the loco still can't really do much of a crawl, and it does run quite fast, and some people on my review for this criticised the speed that this ran at. To be honest with you though, that's because I have very different experiences of Rocket. My previous Rocket, up until this year, was this, which really did go like a rocket. It's actually very hard to get these to crawl without stalling. So yeah, my frame of reference is very different. Now, both of these have performed before on my channel, but I will just show you them briefly to give you an idea. So here we go with the modern Rocket. Oh, it's actually gone out of shot. But as you can see, while it isn't a great crawler, I mean, that's kind of the minimum speed it starts at. While it's not an amazing crawler, it is a lot better than what you're about to see from the Triang, which was impressive at the time. Oh, and it has actually stalled there, has it? Oh, no, just sped it up a bit. So there we go. I mean, it's very impressive, to be honest with you. Very impressive. Okay, the bit I'm dreading then, is it actually going to work? Sometimes when you take the body off this thing and put it back on again, it doesn't always work again afterwards. Right, well, let's find out whether it does. Oh yeah, yep, it does. Now I'm going to do my absolute best to get this to crawl, but as you're going to see, it is very difficult. There we go. Oh, I mean, it's much more difficult to do, but it can more or less manage a similar crawl to the new Hornby one, but it's far less reliable. There we are. A bit more. No, it's cut out now, which I don't particularly like doing. Well, try again. Look at that. That's not bad, is it? But yeah, it's very difficult to sustain it, and it's much less reliable. Okay, let's do a 50% speed test. Are you ready? I'll show you this. I'll actually do what I shouldn't do and just ram it up to 50 straight away. So here we go, 50 on the rocket from the Triang. Yep, I think that says it all, doesn't it? And then 50 on the rocket from Hornby in 2020. Oops, wrong way. Again, here we go. Still speedy, but nowhere near as speedy as the Triang. The pulling power between these two locos is also very different thanks to their vastly different weights. So the modern Hornby version weighs in at 44 grams loco and tender, and the Triang version weighs in at 73 grams loco and tender. So quite a bit of difference. They both can manage 3 coaches without any problems, although obviously the Triang manages it a bit easier than the latest Hornby does. Anyway, let's get these going and I'll talk about the price as we do. So, oh, yep, still got 50% speed on there. Not a good idea. There we are, a bit slower, shall we? There we go. And the Hornby as well, there we are. So there are 1 or 2 challenges when it comes to the price. Obviously it's been 57 years, so comparing them is quite difficult. I managed to find a price from 1965 for the Triang rocket, and it was 52 shillings and 6pence, I think it was, which approximately converts to £6 and 30 pence. There we go. Obviously though, there's been quite a bit of inflation since then, so actually that converts to £123 in today's money. Now the new Hornby rocket has an RRP of £179.99, which is obviously quite a big increase. That's around 50% more than the old version. Now yes, obviously the two models are totally different. The Hornby, modern Hornby one that is far more detailed, but also don't forget both of these models represent what the latest technology can deliver. The old version, while not very detailed, was very detailed for the time. So it's not actually true when people say that model railways isn't more expensive now than it used to be. It is, and quite considerably so. However, it's changed a lot as well. The purpose of these models have now changed, and the level of detail has changed as well, which is pretty interesting, I guess. So there you go, there's a little bit on cost. Well, there you go then, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed that little comparison. Yeah, it does at least show just how far we've come in, you know, relatively short period of time, I suppose. I mean, 60 years. Seems like there's been a lot of change, and that is quite amazing. So yeah, I mean, let me know what you think. Which model would you choose if you had the choice? Although I think that's a fairly easy question, isn't it? And let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. For now though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one, and I will see you on the next one with some more reviews and running sessions. Alright, cheers folks, take care.